You know what's worse than people not trusting you? You not trusting yourself. And I don't mean that in some vague motivational way. I mean that sick feeling when you say, tomorrow I'm going to wake up early. This week I'll start eating clean again. Or I'm going to go all in on myself now. But deep down, you already know you're just not going to follow through. You know, I remember sitting at the edge of my bed after sleeping in again, scrolling for 20 minutes, even after getting up. And the first thought that hit me was guilt. It was shame. Because it wasn't just that I skipped the gym. It was the fact that I promised myself I wouldn't and still did. That's when I realized, I wasn't struggling with motivation. I was struggling with self-trust. And, when a man doesn't trust his own word, he walks through the world with his own head down. Not because he's weak, but because he's just not convinced that he's reliable anymore. That's when shit gets hard, right? Because when you keep breaking promises to yourself, well, your subconscious starts filing evidence, and that evidence that piles up, every time that you say you'll do something and you don't, well, you're teaching yourself that your word means absolutely nothing. And, over time, you just don't believe in your goals anymore. Not because they're impossible, but because the guy who set them keeps disappearing, he keeps ghosting. But look, here's the good news. You can fix this. Self-trust isn't built through grand gestures and all this stuff, but it's built through small wins stacked daily over and over. Now, when you say, I'm going to train today, and you do it, well, that's a vote of confidence in yourself. When you say, I'm going to create content today, and you follow through, well, that's another vote, right? And look, eventually these votes, they keep stacking up, they're going to outweigh the doubt. So, look, here's what I did to rebuild my self-trust. And I guess what I'd tell the old me if it was sitting right here. Firstly, make smaller promises. Forget the 5 a.m. cold plunges. Forget the 3-hour routines. Just start with one thing. I'll get up and walk for about 20 minutes, get some sun, just get moving. That's it. Secondly, keep it sacred. When you commit to something, treat it like a blood oath. No wiggle room, no excuses. It has to be done. Thirdly, stack evidence, not emotion. You don't need to feel motivated. You need to show yourself who you are through action. So if this is hitting home and you feel like you've been lying to yourself for too long, well, then maybe it's time to rebuild. But, start small, start quiet, but start now. And if you want help building a system, and rewiring your identity from the ground up, book a free call. Let's do this properly. Let's get you winning. But look, listen. The most dangerous man in the room isn't the loudest, right? It's the one who trusts himself the most, because that man doesn't second guess himself. He doesn't need validation from other people. He doesn't need the hype, the BS. He doesn't need the applause. He just moves with certainty. And that certainty, it's available to you, but only if you find it, when your actions start matching your words. So if this hit, drop a comment. I'm rebuilding trust. Like this if it spoke to you. Send this to a bro who's fighting the same war, who's in the trenches at the moment. I see you. Let's keep going. I'll catch you guys in the next video.